Okay, here we are. The last time we were talking about the free press and comparing it with the press situation around the world. A lot of questions about conglomerization, that is, newspapers, media outlets buying one after another. I mean, most media outlets today are owned by about 6 or 7 companies. And that's including major movie studios, TV stations, TV networks, radio stations, and newspapers. In 1900, there are some numbers here. There are 2,226 daily newspapers in the United States. 2020, 1,141. That's not counting weekly newspapers, semi-weekly newspapers. Those may only come out a couple times a week. So there's several thousand, so many more of those in the United States. But most of those are local newspapers that really don't have a lot of circulation and don't get a lot of hard, in-depth news. So a lot of small town newspapers. It's Fred Jones retired after 40 years at the plant this week. That's it. Take a picture of the paper, smiling, shaking hands. Good for Fred. But does it really say much about what's going on in the community? Probably not. Um, Actually, a lot of newspapers, the big deal is the sports coverage. That's why a lot of people actually still do subscribe to newspapers. It's kids are in sports, there are pictures in the paper every so often. Like I said, the local news just really isn't that local or hard hitting. A lot of newspapers, you don't even know who's even running for office until election day. And they might have one short article on who won afterward. The Already News Times here, it's owned by the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. They have a small chain of newspapers here across Arkansas. They You can't get a print subscription anymore. What you do is they get you a free tablet and they get you you get a digital version of it. Which means you can't line your um, cat's litter box or bird cage with it, and it's a lot harder to swat a fly with it. But that's what they did. Why did they do this? Because price of newsprint's going so high. It takes a lot of money to be able to print up several thousand copies of a newspaper on that newsprint. It costs ink plus newsprint. You got to have ads to pay for it, plus subscriptions to pay for it. That's basically their business model is a combination of ad revenue and and subscription costs. At most newspapers, and you have some small town newspapers, just one guy running it. You have what they call a budget meeting. The next issue goes out, and you sit down there, the heads of different departments and the editors, and they decide, okay, what are going to be our lead stories going to be? What's gone on that day? What's coming off the AP wire? What the reporters are working on? And they already have sectioned off large areas of the newspaper for ad space. People pay to be in the newspaper, they're going to make sure it runs. Actually, in some communities, in some states, it is the law that certain things have to be printed in the newspaper. I adopted 2 kids years ago, and what we had to do was adopted through marriage, we had to print notices in the newspaper of where we thought their fathers were, to make sure they had notification that this adoption proceeding is going on. Actually, we have local meetings of city council meetings, storage commission meetings, all the local commission meetings. By law, we have to publish in the newspaper a public notice that these meetings are going to happen. Actually, even in bankruptcy cases, a lot of states, they require that in the local newspaper they have to print a notification, such and such has filed for bankruptcy. So by law, their creditors could find them. And so those required public notices, that is a nice little chunk of change for the newspapers, but it doesn't cover a lot, especially in smaller towns where you don't have a lot going on. A lot of these newspapers, they are going online, like the El Dorado News Times. You can still get paper copies of them, but they used to have newspaper boxes. They really don't have those out anymore. But
you can get them at Walmart.
Yeah, Walmart, gas stations, places like that. You pick them up. Yeah, I think you can still get it at Berkshire's. But having the paper actually delivered to your door by somebody that doesn't happen anymore. Not this paper. And there are a lot of local communities. All they really are served by is a website, a web page. Except my columns is syndicated in a little paper called the Bonham E-News. Bonham, Texas, that's their newspaper, the E-Newspaper. Yeah. Same thing for the newspaper in Arkadelphia. The Siftings Herald shut down years ago, but the guy started a website, so I started printing through him. Now, newspapers generally used to be there all around you. I mean, millions of people read newspapers. Let's give you some numbers here. Readers, U.S. daily newspapers. 1982, there's 62.4 million readers of daily newspapers in the United States. I covered about a quarter in terms of population, but a good portion of all the adults in the country read a daily newspaper. 2021, 23.3 million. Dropped by nearly 2/3. In terms of ad revenue, in 2006, $49.2 billion in ad revenue, including classifieds, newspapers, so forth. Sometimes really like they'll pull out, someone will buy that big full page ad, color ad. That's a good little chunk of change for them, but not very often. 2022, $9.7 billion. Now, as you can see from these numbers, that's a lot. That's still a lot of money, and that's one reason why people try to buy up. So these companies try to buy up so many newspapers. $49.2 billion versus 9.0.
It's kind of like kind of very.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, we get it. 62 million readers in 1982, 23 in 2021. No problem. No problem. Again, so you can see the numbers. Somebody wants a piece of that. Somebody still wants a piece of this. See why they want to buy it. And of course, when they buy a newspaper, what do they want to do? They want to immediately recover their investment as quickly as possible. They paid for it. So they do start shutting down staff, cutting pages, cutting sections. They even consolidate newsrooms. Save money. What does that do? Well, it means fewer reporters, less stories getting out because these people are only human. They cover so many things, go to so many meetings at once. Plus, they have to write it up. Plus, it has to be edited, go through a proofreading process. I worked at the Daily Texan when I was in college, in the student newspaper at UT. We had to go. Our stories went up to our editor, went up to the senior editor to look at. So we had our budget meeting beforehand. Then, as it was being printed out, it would go through 2 rounds of editing. Make sure it was to make sure it was properly. Make sure everything's properly spelled and everything and so forth. Make sure it made sense, that the facts were correct, especially make sure the facts are correct. Then we would send it up. But suppose there's a big major thing happening in the middle of the night. Big change in story. Okay, you have the paper's already printed away. Stop, change the story, and then print the rest. Because sometimes there would be a difference between the versions that are printed early versus versions printed later. It stopped, changed the type, place plates, and everything, going from there. M for million, B for billion. Sorry. Yeah, it's ad revenue. Okay. Yeah. How much money to make? Just add ads. Again, this is not counting subscription costs process either. Last section always to go to press at our newspapers is ran 5 days a week. So what was the last thing to go to press? Sports scores. Always waiting for the games to finish on the West Coast. Actually, that paper was free because since it was a student publication, student costs, you paid for got a subscription through your tuition at UT. But of course, they're sitting out there. Anybody walking onto campus could grab a couple of copies if they wanted. Actually, papers are a lot more expensive today.
The light is very.
I'm sorry.
The light too.
Yeah, it's not very good lighting in this room, unfortunately. But anyway, yeah. So when I was in college, living in the dorm, what would my morning routine be? Pay 25 cents to buy a copy of the Dallas Morning News, go down to the cafeteria and have breakfast and go on with my day. And 25 cents for a newspaper. Yeah. Dinosaurs were walking the earth, and in my day, we had to walk uphill in the snow both ways. I knew it. This whole thing was all orange groves as far as the eye could see. But anyway. But anyways, that same copy of the Dallas Morning News today, you'd have fewer pages, and it'd be about $2 an edition. It's only 30 years of difference, not very much time at all, because everything's gotten that much more expensive. And fewer people are reading. Like I said, the problem with the web pages, some of them are done very, very well, is one, you have to go find it. And unless you're looking specifically for something, you may not find it. You may not run across it. Like I say, you have Facebook and links to it, Twitter and links off to that, but you have to actually be looking for it. It has to be in that algorithm you find it. Because it's in your algorithm for a few days. Yeah. Because it may be in your feed for a few days doesn't mean it's going to stay in there. Because something else will come in and knock it out. Same thing with their web pages is even if they're flagged and which one are you looking for?
It's just, I cannot see correctly.
Okay.
The lights.
Oh.
Ignore me.
2022, $9.7 billion. 2006, $49.2 billion. Okay. So, yeah, you have to actually seek out this particular newspaper. And then the second problem is paywalls. You have to have a subscription to be able to read all this stuff in a lot of cases. Some of the stuff is free, available for free, but some it's not. A lot of that's not very good. A lot of it's clickbait, picked up from other sites. In 2023, what are the biggest papers in the United States? First, the Wall Street Journal. Basically, the business paper of the United States. It's a nationwide paper. It reports on all the business goings on in the world. Second, the New York Times. Been a publication since 1851. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Third biggest one, the New York Post. The earliest incarnation of this newspaper was actually founded by Alexander Hamilton in the early 1800s. It's what they call a tabloid. You know, most newspapers are kind of big, long things. Tabloids are kind of small and compact, designed to be able to read fairly easily. New York Post, it's famous for these very salacious, sensationalistic stories. David Letterman, you had a show years ago, he used to have his list of the most popular headlines in the New York Post, headline words used in the New York Post. One of them was, top one was a tie between Sleigh Fest and Lotto winner. Four, the Washington Post. Fifth, USA Today. Times, the Post, and the Washington Post, those are considered local newspapers because they devote a lot of attention to what's going on in their home cities, like Washington, D.C., and like New York City. Now, Washington Post has a metro section. USA Today, that is a national newspaper. It's circulated all over the country. Not a big newspaper, but it tells a little bit of what's going on in the world. Not very in-depth, but it's there. So, I like paper newspapers, so I subscribe to the USA Today because they have 2 crossword puzzles and a Sudoku every day. But that's me.
What's the top?
These are the top newspapers in the United States of 2023. New York City, as late as 1970, had like 7 daily newspapers. Now there's down to 3, the Times, the Post, and the Daily News. Washington, D.C. is down to just 2, Washington Times, the Washington Post, but the Times is more of a nationwide newspaper, not so much a local newspaper. Dallas used to have 2 major daily newspapers until the early 1990s, the Dallas Morning News, the Dallas Times-Herald. The Times-Herald went bankrupt and shut down in the early 90s. So, the early 90s, the Little Rock had 2 major daily newspapers. The Arkansas Democrat and the Arkansas Gazette. Gazette went bankrupt, and the Democrat bought it out and combined the 2 as the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Primarily a Little Rock newspaper, but But it basically covers the entire state. Both of them had. It's a small
Wall Street Journal.
Wall Street Journal,
I'm sorry, yes, I got
New
it.
York Times.
You can keep talking, I'm not trying to bother you.
Okay, it's all right. Just having a bad day. It's okay. They had kind of a small state population wise and kind of geographical wise, like Arkansas. It's easy to cover the entire state, and in a lot of states the newspaper, the state capital, covers a lot of state news, particularly because so much going on in the state legislature. Like in Iowa, the Des Moines Register is the major newspaper of the state. So Denver, they have the Denver Post. They used to have the Rocky Mountain News was their other paper. They shut down too. Detroit still has two daily newspapers, the Detroit News, the Detroit Free Press. And some of these papers are named because they were bought out, they kind of consolidated. Some newspapers, they used to run two editions, a morning edition and a night and an afternoon edition. Most papers come out in the mornings now. They do all the printing at night and send it out early in the morning. El Dorado, the newspaper until the 1920s, they ran two editions, and they're called different names. The first one was the El Dorado News was the morning paper, then the El Dorado Evening Times being, of course, the evening paper. They're just combined, start running just one daily paper as the El Dorado News Times. So on and so forth. And sometimes where something really big happened in the world, they'd run what they called an extra. Just a special extra edition of it. But they really haven't done that since the 1980s because it's just too expensive. Plus you've got other forms of media to look at. So where do people get their news today? Social media, or they don't. Social media, might as well not get it at all.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about, I have a couple friends on the internet today telling me that, they had friends at work saying, "Oh, we had the election? They already decided?" But you got radio, cable, TV, and the internet. That's competing with newspapers. But again, it's kind of, with this, you have to kind of seek out the news. And you have to be a discriminating consumer of news. Don't just, oh, these people are telling me exactly what I want to hear, let's just watch them. Because it may not be accurate. The 2020 election, a couple of news outlets started reporting that this rumor that was circulating online, there's no basis in it, that one of the major manufacturers of voting machines had purposely altered their machines to transfer votes from one candidate to another. They started reporting this all over. They didn't verify it. The manufacturers insisted it was wrong, it was a lie. So what happened? They sued them for everything they had. One major news station, Fox News, they had to pay $787 million. The other one got sued for that same amount. They just settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, but you can guarantee it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. They probably may not be around much longer. So again, the responsibility of free press, report the truth. I'll go back into libel cases here in a minute. But You got competition from cable and internet, but again, cable, you have so many different stations. Only a couple of them actually showing news. Got a lot of stations, but news is very sparing. Regular broadcast television. Usually have news in the morning, at noon, 5 p.m., and 10 p.m. That's it. 30-minute little snippets, and you got everything else in between. If you happen to be watching a station with news. The ABC affiliate out of Monroe, such a small station, they don't have a local newscast. And somebody sit there for 5 minutes to tell you what the weather is, but they'll have ABC's World News Tonight at 5:30 at Nightline, and at night, and that's it. But the CBS and NBC affiliates, they do have their local newscasts. Internet. How much on the internet is actually news? And then news you can actually find useful and is truthful.
1%.
Hey, not even that much. There are about 1 billion web pages in the world today. That may be a very conservative estimate, but not a lot of our news sites. And radio. Yeah, you have a couple stations that call themselves news stations, but they're basically talk stations. Basically, just somebody giving you his opinion on the news. That's it. A lot of guys are alcoholics too. I can name several prominent ones who are notorious drunks. But
I'm surprised radio's still around.
yeah, the only reason it's still around really is because people driving. People want people going to work. They want something to listen to on the way in. There's a guy on the morning radio cast. I know a couple of those guys. They're pretty nice. Sit there and tell you, okay, what's traffic? Is there an accident anywhere? Are the bus routes running? What's the weather going to be today? Play a couple songs. That's about it. Not a lot news-wise, but it's kind of get you just enough to get you from point A to point B. Something so you're not sitting in the car in silence. People like background noise. Next time, people listen to podcasts and audiobooks in the car. Yeah, yeah, they do. Satellite radio, that's a thing. A lot of people listen just to very specialty stations or just these nationwide DJs. Listen to Howard Stern or whatever. Listen to sportscasters talking. But again, of the radio stations, there aren't a lot devoted strictly to news. PBS stations, NPR, National Public Radio, they'll do a couple hours of news at a time, but it's broken up by a lot of other programming. But a lot of people listen to radio still just have something in the background to listen to. How many radio stations are there in the United States? 15,445 as of 2023. It really is. A lot of stations. That is over 302 radio markets. Again, Parker's dying here. That's right. That's why I'm not coaching right. That's why I'm not in the NBA. Of course, my age, I think I would have had to retire long ago. 302 markets. 15,445 stations.
That's much better.
Yeah. Hard to find that right color sometimes. But yeah, But divide that up, it's about some, here in El Dorado, that's considered some media market. We have about 8 or 10 stations. Go to Little Rock, about 30, 40 stations. Dallas, about 50, 60 stations. And some of those kind of overlap. You can pick up radio stations on a clear night, radio stations from here in El Dorado, from Dallas, New Orleans, Nashville at night. Some nights, well, there's just right, you can pick up stations from Cincinnati, Ohio. I was sitting in Dallas, I could pick up radio stations out of Denver sometimes. If the weather's right, it was right at night. At some stations, they broadcast with more power than others, give them a bigger broadcast range than others. There's big 50,000 watt radio stations, like say KRLD or WBAP out of Dallas. You can pick those up in El Dorado. There's big 50,000 watt stations, like say WSM broadcast the Grand Ole Opry out of Nashville. You can pick that up in El Dorado. You can pick that up in Atlanta. But again, are these news stations? FCC requires some kind of public interest to be broadcast. That's why you often see these stations, radio stations, they broadcast those public awareness ads, like get your flu shot or is your brain on drugs, that famous commercial. That was an FCC requirement for public benefit, anti-drug campaigns and so forth. They won't broadcast the weather, some little snippet being played all day about what the weather's going to be all day. I remember one year, it was about 15, 20 years ago or so, it started pouring down rain here in town. Just bottom just falls out of the sky. And a few minutes after that, this guy comes on the radio and says, yeah, we have a 70% chance of rain today. It's already pouring down rain, streets are flooding. So, yeah, it might rain today. It was the same recording they played all day, didn't bother updating it. That was just here in El Dorado. They just didn't bother updating it. They've changed. They've improved it since then, and get it to their credit. But they dropped the ball that day. Yeah, these radio stations. Most of them are music stations. You might have a sports station just talks about sports. But very rarely do you have one that's just news, or one that's just news and not people's opinion on it. A lot of what they call automated stations. Basically, they just buy programming from other areas and they broadcast it on their stations. Nationwide DJ playing the same music all over the country, nationwide top radio host or something like that. They don't have to put out a lot of expense for salary for people here in town. Casey Kasem, he made a fortune starting in 1970 when he started the syndicated program American Top 40. Just played the top 40 songs, counting down across the country. And he did that until almost 1990, almost 20 years. A lot of stations loved it because it meant Saturday or Sunday mornings, they don't have a lot of people around. They don't want to have the expense of having an all-day DJ. They could just run that tape, run it a couple times that day. So for 2 or 3 hours, they didn't have to pay a DJ. And it was a popular program. Cost-effective, popular is what they needed. So popular that they actually play some of the reruns still on a lot of stations on the weekends, especially the classic rock stations. But a lot of major cities do not have daily newspapers. where do they get their news from? I mean, they don't all have a reporter sitting in the White House waiting for the president's next announcement. They don't have a reporter sitting in the state capitol waiting for something. A lot of times they do. They have all the wire services. Newspapers and magazines, they all subscribe to these wire services. Radio and TV stations will too. Most popular one is the Associated Press. The AP it's actually a conglomerate of newspapers. You write a story, it goes on the AP wires, and it goes for all the member newspapers to see.
I've been feeling like the AP and Trump was.
Yeah.
That's why I was wondering that's what it is.
That's what it is, the Associated Press. Sometimes they pay enough subscriber fees, they can actually pay to have their own reporters at, say, in Washington, D.C. or New York, wherever else, who can write these national reports for all their members. But a lot of times it's local stories being picked up and sent out, like, say, the Arkansas Democrat Gazette picks up a story about some major fraud investigation at the state capitol. AP Wire picks it up. Newspapers at 5, 10, 20 markets will start running it. Oh, big scandal in Little Rock. Or factory explosion in Cleveland. Local newspaper writer will write it. AP Wire will pick it up. And papers all over the country will be reporting it. Or particularly pictures. They sent pictures out. They used to be over the wires, now over the internet, but you can buy the neat little pictures, they say. They used to say, they send these pictures out, they're picked up by papers all over the country. Today they say they went viral, but basically they're picked up by the AP Wire. Sometimes I'll write a newspaper column in string, and it'll pick the wire services. Sometimes they'll pick it up and send it all over the country. When Russia invaded Ukraine, I wrote a column briefly on the history of Ukraine and its relations with Russia. Wire services picked it up, sent it all over the country. A Rotary Club in Willamette Valley of Oregon asked me to speak to them, not realizing I was way out here in Arkansas. So I did the talk with them by internet. Nice people. Yeah, join your local Rotary Club. You can start with the call it as a Rotaract Club. But I also have other wire services, UPI, United Press International. Used to be this United Press, United International. That's one of the big ones. Not as big as it used to be. The 1980s and into the 1990s, there was another one called the Knight Ridder Service. The Knight Ridder Newswire Service. They own a chain of newspapers, and your paper can subscribe to those stories and pick them up. Yeah, it just went out of business in the 1990s, but when we were working today, Texas, we used to call it Night Rider. Because usually we're riding at night, plus everyone in that newsroom had grown up watching that old TV show. The Knight Ridder, that's a very popular one. Reuters. This is a British service, but they're really good on international news. They have some pretty good stories here in the United States. Yeah, it's actually, but there's no rules to the English language. You know that. Every rule has about 30 exceptions. Yeah, but it's kind of fun looking. But they're really good on international news. You really want to find out what's going on in the world. Reuters. Yeah. The thing is, though, because newspapers and news services aren't just enough, they branch off into other things like consumer research and things like that. But the question, are we informed? You know, the book has some interesting information here at 164. News consumption as of yesterday. Question from this one survey. Did you read a newspaper yesterday? All respondents 21 and older, 1960, 71% said yes. 2015, only 20%. Under 35, 67% in 1960 said they had read a newspaper the day before. For 1990, that had dropped to 30%, to 8% by 2015. And again, the advantages a newspaper has over broadcast, radio news broadcast, that little snippet they have at the top of the hour, maybe 30 seconds per story. TV news broadcast, maybe 2 or 3 minutes on a story for something really big. Newspapers, 500 to 1,000, 2,000 words on a story. Goes into a lot more depth and detail than a TV or radio station usually would. Like I said, news magazines like Time and Newsweek, U.S. News and World Report, The Economist, they go into a lot of details on very specific stories. They don't have as many stories, but they have a lot of in-depth information on them. But even older people, 74% of Americans over the age of 50 had read a newspaper the day before in 1960. Dropped to 55% by 1990 to only 37% by 2015. And these numbers are all lower today. People just don't read newspapers. What happens as a result? You don't make yourself informed. You don't have as much information. Especially a large newspaper, they have a special or an insert on the candidates and what they're doing. You don't see that. Maybe find yourself in a polling place, voting for offices. You have no idea who they are or what they do. Maybe voting for a guy who just got convicted of grand larceny or grand theft auto, and you don't know that because you didn't read about it in the newspaper, local news. You just vote for him because, I like how the name sounds, or it's first on the ballot line. Those things do happen. Watched TV news yesterday. This has remained more consistent because TV news does broadcast usually in 30-minute little snippets. 1960, all respondents 55 over 21, 55% had. But by 2015, 52% had. Under 35, 52% had watched TV news the day before 1960. But only 37% by 2015. So even watching TV news, a lot of people don't do anymore. But a lot of stations have a lot of newscasts because it fills time and they're not too terribly expensive to produce. If they're at 50, 1960, 62% had. By 2015, 60% had. But that was still a decline from just a few years before when 67% had. Read news online or digitally yesterday. In the year 2000, when they first started running those numbers, 46% of people under 34 had. It had risen up to 61% by 2015. The age of 50 is 20% in 2000, 39% by 2015. It doubled, but still, not a lot of people getting the news online either. It's not really getting a lot of news. On up into the 1980s, the 1950s and 1980s, you basically had three stations in a typical media market. The major networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS. Fox wouldn't come on until the late 80s. You have a lot of independent stations, but they basically just, what they usually do is just usually show old movies and old cartoons and everything. Now, growing up in Dallas, we had about, I was growing up in the early 80s, we had like three main networks, PBS, let's see, 21, and about had three independent stations and a Spanish language station. About 8 or 9 broadcast stations. Of course, there are a lot of people living in the Dallas area. El Dorado had 2. And sometimes they piggyback broadcasts. You get Channel 7 out of Little Rock. But because those big 3 newscasts, big 3 networks, those were most people are getting their nightly news. That's why Walter Cronkite, who was the anchor for the CBS Evening News for so many years, from like 1962 to 1981, almost 20 years, basically about a third of America was watching him every night. Same guy, he's telling the same stories, finish off with, that's the way it is. That was a sign off. That's the way it is for whatever date, 19 whatever. For all of us at CBS News, good night. Same thing NBC and ABC. That's where you got your national news from, was one of those broadcasts. ABC, World News Tonight, NBC Nightly News with Huntley and or Brinkley or no Tom Brokaw, and then what we got now. But when cable started coming out, first starts coming out in the late 70s, larger areas, and most of the rest of the country by the early 80s. What cable meant was, now you have all these extra stations. All these other things you can watch, not just the few broadcast stations. So people started watching them. People started watching MTV. There was a time MTV actually did play music. They quit doing that years ago, and I'm not sure why they even bother calling themselves MTV anymore, but that's a different story for another day. But ESPN, like I said, CNN and the Weather Channel and all those, you could watch pretty much whatever you wanted to. You didn't have to get your news at any one particular time. And a lot of people just quit getting news altogether. Anyways, in 1964, about 88% of American households had access between 1 and 12 TV channels. That is, they lived in a media market between 1 and 12 channels. But problem is, in 1964, only about 30-40% of Americans owned a TV set. But by 2000, 69% of American households with TV sets could receive 26 or more channels because of cable. By 2014, with satellite and everything, the average home received 189 channels. But of the 189 stations, yes, and you know this already, you only watched a few of them. Average American only watched 17 channels out of the 189 they had access to. Because you only have so much of an attention span. You want to waste your time watching something you don't want to watch. So, of these radio stations, 302 markets, that covers 82% of the United States. Apparently, it's 15,445 stations. Worldwide, there are about 44,000 stations. About a third of the radio stations on Earth broadcast out of the United States. 44,000 44,000 radio stations worldwide, 15,000 in the United States. And they reach about 5 billion people. A lot of areas of the world are just simply too remote and don't have radio stations. Over a third. It's all because, one, we're a big country, big population, but compared to a lot of areas of the world, we're a lot wealthier.
Country they don't have.
Yeah, some countries don't have any at all. North Korea might have one, but that's a state-owned telling you, this is what you will do today. Have you honored the dictator today? Have you honored the dictator? Why haven't you? Report them. But here's the thing about how TV stations and radio stations operate is they use what's called the public airwaves. You turn your radio station to a particular station, they're broadcasting a particular piece of the electromagnetic spectrum. What happens if two radio stations broadcast on the same frequency? Yeah, they jam each other. They drown each other out. Sometimes I can pick up Shreveport station in the morning, and they're having problems with their transmitter, or the weather's kind of funny over Shreveport. So I pick up the same station out of like New Orleans or Little Rock instead, broadcasting on the same frequency. But what's the electromagnetic spectrum? It's light. Energy on electromagnetic waves, what you can see and what you can't see. Infrared, white light, ultraviolet, gamma rays, X-rays, they all operate on a particular frequency. And radio waves only exist in a very narrow spectrum. But you can't own a particular frequency, same thing radio or TV, because it's like saying I own the color blue or I own the color green. You don't own that. It belongs to everybody. So the government does make sure everybody gets a fair shot of broadcasting. They license broadcasters. So you can broadcast on this frequency at this wattage for this range. So someone else, they have a chance to broadcast what they want in another town on the same frequency. So they're not drowning each other out. You're not jamming a radio station. For example, take the TV station, Channel 4. TV stations don't generally carry as far as radio stations, but you have a limited number of stations that can broadcast a particular frequency. So Channel 4 in Little Rock, NBC affiliates, most of Central Arkansas. But go down to New Orleans, you have a Channel 4, CBS affiliate, WWL. Just takes in southern Mississippi and southern Louisiana. Dallas, they have their Channel 4, Fox affiliate, but just for Dallas and North Texas. Oklahoma City has a Channel 4, but you have media markets in between each other. And that's an NBC affiliate. New York City has a Channel 4. Their NBC affiliate, WNBC. But not every area has a Channel 4. We are in a very specific media market. As we kind of overlap on. Shreveport, Channel 3 and Channel 12. You can sometimes pick those up, but because of the broadcast range, the next broadcast market over can't have a Channel 3 or a Channel 12. Monroe, they get into this area too, parts of western Mississippi. You have Channel 8, 10, and 11. the broadcast stations, and 14. The nearest channel 8 after that would be New Orleans and Dallas. And a couple of media markets in between. They're not going to interrupt each other. So, idea of public airwaves. This is established in 1927 by the Federal Radio Commission. The Radio Act of 1934 established the FCC.
Radioactive.
1934, the Radio Act. They established the Federal Communications Commission, which is a federal board that sits in Washington, D.C., members appointed by the president, and they license broadcasters. Say who gets to broadcast where, what frequency, and also they regulate what they broadcast. Now, they're not going to say what editorial content you can include, but what you can choose to broadcast, but things like, decency, make sure there's no one running around naked or a bunch of bloodshed all over a broadcast TV station. No one cussing people out.
Well, you can't really run around naked though.
Well, I said because of the FCC.
On the
They're going to
radio,
broadcast for decency.
but there's no way for you to run around naked on the radio. If people would know.
Yeah, you can. They're not. Yeah, radio's not going to know if you do or not. Howard Stern always got in a lot of trouble for it because he would say he's doing these things, but no one can see if he's doing it or not. And he always would run right up to the line without crossing it. That's why he became so popular, because he would run right up to the line. He'd go as far as he could.
What is the line? What is the line?
Explicitly sexual, explicit graphic violence, certain cuss words you can't use. George Carlin used to have a thing, you probably find on YouTube, it's the 7 dirty words. Certain things you can't say. A part of this is also you cannot deny a politician wants to buy an ad on your TV station. Radio TV station can't deny that. If there's something wrong with the ad, like it's grossly unfactual or libelous, they can refuse it. But if you're a Democrat wanting to advertise on a Republican-owned TV station or vice versa, they can't tell you no. But in a lot of states, they do have what's called the equal time doctrine, or the equal time rule, which is time you give on a newscast for a politician, you have to give equal time to the other person. So the equal time rule. The licensing for technical requirements and make sure you're not violating the decency rules, but also make sure you are providing a public benefit. That's part of your license process, and you have to show that to the FCC to keep your license. To show that, yes, we provide a public benefit. The biggest one they provide is by saying, yes, we offer news broadcasts. Tell people what's going on. We offer weather and weather warnings. We run public awareness, public ad campaigns. Yeah, no littering, don't use drugs, things like that. Remember those commercials you see on TV all the time? This brought to you by the Ad Council, or you hear it on a radio station. It's brought to you by the Ad Council and your local radio stations. It's part of their licensing requirement to show you're providing a public benefit for it. They're being exposed to radiation on this frequency. We are getting something out of it. It's safe. It's safe. Don't worry about that. But overall, a public benefit. In 1949, they created something called the Fairness Doctrine for radio TV. Make sure that these stations would be required to provide these stations would provide equal time to Democrats and Republicans. It wouldn't be favoring one or the other. So it wouldn't just be one station just bad mouthing one party all 24/7. That was repealed in 1987. From 49 to 87, you'd have a Democratic line, a Republican line, they have on C-SPAN now. That was repealed in 1987. After that, you have this explosion of talk radio programs. Fairness Doctrine.
19. Oh, what is the 19?
1949, Fairness Doctrine. 49 was repealed in 87. That's when all of a sudden you have these stations who are broadcasting nothing but one or two guys bad mouthing one political party all day. Because the Fairness Doctrine was repealed, they can broadcast whatever they want. So at last we're out of time here, but we'll keep talking about media and interest groups a little bit more next time. Keep reading your book. Anything else? We'll see y'all later on.